segment of talking about the best video games we played this year. So starting off, why don't we introduce ourselves? Starting with you, Clever Diversion.
Thank you. This is famed, world-renowned streamer Clever Diversion. I'm sure you're watching this on my channel because it's the best channel in the world. And these are my amazing, fantastic, and soon-to-be famous friends. We treasure this time every year, even though we're always late, to talk about the games of, in this case, the last 2 years. And I will be bringing, I think, Morrowind and Red Dead Redemption 2. And I'm going to popcorn over to our lovely and famous Shaunasaur.
Hello. I'm actually sharing a mic with Clever Diversion, so when you see his little name thing pop up and hear my voice, hi, it's me. I'm Shaunasaur. I'm an artist. I sell stuff at conventions doing fan art, and I have TikTok and Instagram. I haven't delved into the world of streaming yet, but by how much I love The Sims 4, which you're soon going to have to sit through my rant on, I might start doing that soon, so stay tuned. And who wants to go next?
Yeah. How about carbon speed dating?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, there we go. Sorry, my microphone's giving me some trouble. Yeah, I don't play as much video games, but when I do, I try to finish like more story-based stuff. So I think out of all of us, I'll be introduced to some new games here as well. I think for the most part, I've seen folks play a lot of these, so it'll be an exciting time to see what people's thoughts are on stuff.
It's really good. The games that carbon speed dating always brings are some of the most underrated bangers that I've come across. And I'm really excited for their entries this year. What about you, Hale Noxid?
Hello, I'm Hale Noxid. I don't know what any of these other people are talking about, all this video game talk. I'm excited to talk about the salsa. The video game talk should really only take us.
We'll get there. We're
like 5 minutes.
The salsa is the main event, and we'll get there.
So I'm really excited to talk about my top 3 salsas this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But aside from the salsa, just for the time being, what games are you bringing this year?
Oh, I did take the assignment very seriously, and I brought Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh my god,
because they're winners.
Yeah,
Noxid understood the assignment.
Yeah.
All right, Rather Sunless.
Bringing up the rear. Hi, Rather Sunless. Mostly here for the salsa, but I do a bit of gaming myself. Had a nice picante you'll probably hear about later. But as far as the games are concerned, I am bringing Armored Core 6 and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on PC.
Wonderful. And finally, I'm Line Arc Line, and this time I'm bringing Elden Ring because I also read the assignment. But I needed one to wrap it up, and so I'm bringing the actual winner, Heroes of the Storm, made by a small indie studio named Blizzard Entertainment. And with that, let's get started. Before we talk about our spiciest salsas, we're going to go to round 1 of the video games that we talked about this year, or that we played this previous 2 years. And this first bracket is The Sims 4, brought by Shaunasaur, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which I believe was brought by Rather Sunless.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us about The Sims 4?
I would absolutely love to. So, The Sims 4 came out nearly 10 years ago, but it's still incredibly relevant right now because it's still being updated for free many times a year. And they also made the base game free-to-play last year, I believe it was. And so The Sims has constantly been judged for being a money grab because there's dozens of expansion packs that all cost money. But the fact that they're moving towards free-to-play for the base game is, I think, a huge flex in their court, because it makes the game so much more accessible. And then you can have packs, and honestly, mods are also free. if you want to. And this past 2-ish years, they've been adding a lot of representation to the game. They added they, them pronouns. They're still working out some of the grammar on that, but they're doing their best. They added hearing aids and insulin pumps. They added all sorts of they added binders. They added vitiligo and birthmarks. They're really doing their part for representation, which is awesome. They also listen to their fans. And so with the most recent mods, there's new stuff like they added horses, which if you know anything about video games, horses are terrible to add into any game. But I realize that I've gotten ahead of myself and haven't explained exactly what The Sims 4 is. So The Sims is a franchise that has started, I think, in the early 2000s, I believe. It's basically a dollhouse sim, it's been called, or a life sim. You make a character or many characters, or you play characters that are already existing in the game, and you're basically playing God in this world of little dudes, and they can have different jobs, they can have different catastrophes happen to them. You are kind of in control, but you're also kind of not. There is a very good amount of chaos to this game, which is why a lot of people very much enjoy it. It gives you the illusion of being in control while still making the game fun and chaotic and challenging. And one of my favorite things about this game is that because it adds this element of chaos but also control, it feels very much like DMing D&D. And we're going to be talking about Baldur's Gate here soon, which is very much the vibes of playing D&D. But when I got back into the Sims franchise, I really realized that The Sims gives me that wonderful feeling of DMing that I can't really get from any other video game, because no other games give you the sandbox and the aspect of control, but also the aspect of chaos. And the game, in the newest versions of it, is very self-aware of the memes, of the swimming pools, of how much people absolutely love killing off their Sims in violent and horrific ways.
Yeah, we watched the trailer just before this, and they're really embracing all of the wonderful stories that I hear about The Sims.
Yes. Yeah, they're sorry, I lost track of where I was.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're totally fine. That's yeah, the trailer made good memes on the swimming pool thing. There was a lot of complaints about the game when it first came out, in that it was not fully finished. I think they released it very, very rushed. But because of that, they've been adding to it so much so that now just the free-to-play base game is a fully functional and wonderful game. And the fact that that is now free-to-play is fantastic. So they could have done better upon release, which kind of gave it a bad rap, but things got better over time. And like I said, there's a huge modding community, which also is good for any game, as I'm sure we'll get into with Morrowind. And it also kind of has some aspects that affected me in my life that I wasn't expecting. Like, I made a self-sim, as many people do, which is both egotistical and very humbling, because my sim quickly got fat from being a work-at-home artist and never going outside, which, too soon, Sims. And it's a game
terrifying.
that's constantly breaking and constantly being fixed, and the amount of community support on this game is something that I've rarely encountered in gaming spaces. So I've had an excellent experience with this game over the past year. It's stood out to me from the franchise, and also just cozy games in general. Like, people go hard for this game, and it's great. So thank you all for listening to my rant, and I'd love to hand the mic off to Rather Sunless with Ratchet & Clank.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, to explain in brief, is, so I'm supposed to use the technical terms, a third-person action platformer, formerly released on the PS5, then coming to PC over the past year or so. But as to why I picked it, why it's here in this list. Because it is, in no uncertain terms, the perfect Saturday morning cartoon of a game. It's you take an entire season, an entire arc of a plot of whatever favorite forgotten Saturday morning cartoon that exists to sell toys that you watched as a kid, compress it all into one video game, and then just play it straight through. Nothing in the game ever detracts from that. Everything supports it. Nothing in the game was ever a negative experience throughout my entire time playing it, which wasn't very long. It's not a super long game. But yeah, it is a flawless expression of what it was trying to be. Whether you want to call it a kid's game or a cartoon or just a pure action game, whatever you want to call it. It is very much that through and through. But the second reason I'm bringing it up is because of the technological benefits that it brings to gaming as a whole, which I haven't seen replicated in any other title. This game is one of the first to fully utilize direct storage, which basically means it doesn't have loading times. It doesn't have a loading screen graphic. You don't get loading screen tips because there aren't any of them. There just aren't loading screens. You hit start and the game's open. You go through a portal to an entirely new traversable world, and it's there. You don't have a pause, you don't have a hitch, you don't have nothing. It represents, I think, one of the first true next generation titles with that, with the full removal of loading, the full removal of pauses, and the full removal of basically anything that detracts from the experience. Yeah, it's a great, wonderful time. Good writing, good acting, looks pretty, runs great. Y'all should play it. It's great.
Awesome. That's fantastic. With those two pitches, which one should win this round?
I think we should also try to name the round. I think
yeah.
Okay,
I
that's
think
right.
that we have, perfect for its audience as a pretty good unifier.
It's just plain fun.
Yeah,
It's just plain fun.
it's a good
I
time.
did really enjoy with Ratchet and Clank trying to find the loading screens.
That is very
It became
fun.
like its own kind of game to try and find when the game was actually loading, which seems like a strange thing to notice, but it was just so seamless. Like when you're talking about like excellency in video games, it's doing something different, just technologically speaking.
I mean,
Mhm.
loading screens have taken so many forms over the years. When we're getting away from the Half-Life 2 like loading where it just pauses the game and says loading, they've tried to be much more subtle with it. I remember in Jedi Survivor, the loading screens were you shimmying through a small crack
Oh yeah.
or climbing a ladder. There's all these ways that they try to hide the loading screen, but in Ratchet and Clank, I get the impression that there just aren't any. Like
Yeah.
the
They hit it by
Nowhere.
making it go away.
obfuscations,
It was
they
so
they take the time of a loading screen but just don't look like it. But Ratchet and Clank doesn't even take the time to load. It
Yeah,
just goes.
there's a sequence. There's actually many sequences that are like this, but one in particular where you're on a series of rails and you're doing that sweet Sonic style grinding on rails while shooting bad guys. Big bombastic experience, and the music's going crazy and stuff. And since this is riding with the wave of the multiverse stories, you're heading through multiversal portals while grinding on rails, and you would expect these to be, maybe a color shift or one or two props load in. No, you go through a portal, and it's a part of an entire active 3D explorable world
moving
with
world too.
NPCs and dozens or even hundreds of ships moving on in the background, complex, distant, and close geometries, and you're in there for 5 seconds
And then
until
you
you're
warp
out,
back.
and you warp back. But it's
It-
real. I jumped off and checked. It's real.
Nice.
and yeah, it just loads instantaneously.
It was
And
just
then
so yeah. It was
yeah.
so funny going because you were playing that game around the same time I got into Baldur's Gate with my old computer. And my poor old computer, like when I had to reload something for Baldur's Gate, I would just get up and do something else for a little while. Like and then I'd come back to it. So like, it's not and especially when you're talking about like immersion. Because the game's not that long. So, staying in that mind space is really helpful.
Mm.
Mhm.
So I think we're ready for a vote. Do you want to do it
I mean-
in Discord?
I want
I
to.
would love to hear more
about
about Sims, to be
Sims.
honest.
Yeah, I would love
Yeah.
to talk
Yeah.
more about it also.
Yeah, I would love
Mhm.
or
to
at
hear
least
because
why I think it's
Yeah.
important to bring it for this year specifically, which is like I mentioned the representation that's been added in the past year and change, and how absolutely like listening to their community they've been, like I said, with the adding horses, and they also added like apartments and whole.
Beauty.
When I say they added these things, I don't mean that like, oh yeah, there's horses now, like they exist. They add an entire world and whole areas of gameplay. It's like every 4 or 5 months they'll come out with an expansion that actually adds an entire game onto this game. And so this
Yeah.
game has so many levels of games that
I was gonna
yeah.
I was gonna come to the defense of Sims 4 in its like criticism of monetization for all of its add-ons. Like in most EA games, that would be true. That it is like just cosmetic additions, but like these are fully developed new items and sequences and locations. Like there's actual work being put into this, and the trade-off that this studio or this part of EA Studios has seemingly agreed to is to let everyone in the door, and then they can choose how expensive Sims is going to be for themselves. And as Shaunasaur mentioned, there's also a huge modding community, and like there are other ways that you can enjoy these customizations that don't cost you more money.
Yeah, and like games go on sale on Steam a lot, and they've even been giving away for free some of their less popular games or less popular expansions. And like you were saying, like it's not just a cosmetic thing. Like when they add vampires, your sim doesn't just get a pair of fangs. They get a whole skill tree of vampire powers that they can develop and work towards, and there's a whole vampire world that they can explore, and there's vampire challenges. Like yeah,
So
it's constantly adding upon itself.
It really makes you feel like a vampire.
Sims
what are
4
some of the things that they've added recently? Like you said, horses, vampires. Like,
there's like
is
a
it a lot?
magic
Vampires is
there's
an
like a
older one, but
magic
yes.
one where there's an entire like spell casting tree and potion ingredients, and
Yeah,
you have
they've
to
added
build
werewolves
a
recently.
alchemy place. Yeah.
Yeah.
They let you be a landlord.
They
And
do.
they let you own an apartment complex and have the tenants organize a revolt against you. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's hilarious. And like I said, like because this game is constantly growing and they're adding so much to it in large chunks, it's also constantly breaking. And so like the landlord pack, it's kind of funny because it got a lot of criticism for, being a pack where you like get to be a landlord. It's very broken to collect rent. Like it doesn't really let you do so very easily. So it kind of makes it not fun to play a landlord, but it's very fun to play a tenant and like have an evil landlord that you get to overthrow, and they're playing to their audience in very fun ways.
I wanted to
But yes.
clarify before when I was. I think we should canvass the polls to see which one to focus on in discussion rather than like do the final vote. So
I see.
can we get
I'm
a read of the
undecided.
room?
Yeah, Sims 4 is like quietly building an RPG, and no one except for fans of Sims 4 is noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Sims 4 should take it.
I believe that The Sims 4 is very much an RPG. I fully agree with this. And I feel like we talked about before, like voting as to whether something would be like a landslide. I don't think that this one is a landslide because I saw little bits of Ratchet and Clank, and I think that it also is fantastic. Like the graphics, the character design, the fact that it is without loading screens is also phenomenal. I personally still also agree with The Sims, but
I did want to ask. So it's not like Hollywood quote unquote one takes where they say it's a one take, but they're hiding the edit. It's truly a seamless load.
Yeah. It just, in fact, you only really notice it because I did in fact find one loading screen. Well,
Gotcha.
one loading
found
hitch.
one.
I jumped from a rail to another rail and loaded into an entire massive world from another massive world, and the game paused for a tenth of a second to do it.
Wow.
Gotcha. All right.
It's wild.
Yeah, because I was gonna.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that also, that we're not even talking about the plot, but like it has a really solid through line. It's, it just at the end of the day, it just ends up being kind of just a really, really solid game in every aspect of it. Technically speaking, visually speaking, the music's great. It's exactly what I mean. I never played the old Ratchet and Clank, so I didn't have much expectation of it, and it was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ratchet and Clank, like in terms of graphics and I guess, for lack of a better word, feel like always has delivered. It's just one of the tried and true solid like 3D action adventure platformers for me.
Yeah, they've clearly been spending, over a decade, refining this formula and perfecting it. And I mean, it just, you play it and you feel like you've just, every time you boot it up, it's like you just got home from middle school and you're booting up your favorite game. It's the only one you got to own, and you're real happy it's Ratchet and Clank, and you're real happy that it's good.
Yeah.
It's that feeling again.
Your game for the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that like they have great characterization in all of their like side characters. There's an entire race of like engineering expertise Wisconsin and Minnesota people that made me laugh for like hours and hours.
Yeah.
These
They're
are
all named
inspired
Mort.
choices.
They're all named Mort. They're a foot tall. They speak with thick, northern Midwest accents, and they all have PhDs in various fields of engineering.
And they love lemonade, and they all have butter, like lemon bar recipes for you.
That's so good.
And they host parties for people, and you specifically. Well, you if you're the other character.
I am struggling with this one because I think I'm kind of leaning towards the Ratchet and Clank because it seems like I would remember the story beats from Ratchet and Clank. But then again, The Sims 4, you spend a lot of time with these characters that you create, and you have unexpected moments with them that are very memorable. And
I feel like The Sims is less about the individual characters that you build and like their characterization, because it's less what because you're designing these characters yourself or they're the children of your other characters. There's less like intentional design in them from the game's point of view, and it's more about the experience and the story and the role-playing aspects and things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say about The Sims 4, like my advocacy for it is Ratchet and Clank is arguably a perfect game for its genre, and that's amazing. But Sims 4 is an entire cultural movement for girl gamers that has slowly been building for the last like 10 years. And it's important to like recognize the sheer volume of people who are in love with The Sims 4 and is, maybe their only game that they play or one of the very few games that they play, but it's kept them engaged for almost a decade.
That does make sense. As someone who is bringing a game who I think I'm one of the few playing, and I've played for a very long time, I think I'm leaning towards The Sims now. The Ratchet and Clank is a fantastic experience, but the cultural power of The Sims can't be ignored.
Okay, should we
Cast
our votes?
Do our vote?
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Okay.
All right, voting in 3, 2, 1. Cast the ballot for democracy.
All right. That is 5 votes. Yep, 5 votes for The Sims 4 and 1 vote for Ratchet Clank Rift Apart. And that makes The Sims 4 the winner of this first bracket. Later, it'll go up against Elden Ring.
Do we have everybody's votes?
Stay
I think we
tuned.
started with 1 vote for each.
I had already cast my vote a little bit.
Okay, gotcha.
And I switched to The Sims 4 after that
Just wanted to make sure.
argument. Yeah. That brings us to the next section, which is Armored Core 6 versus Morrowind. And bringing Armored Core 6, I believe, is
It's
Rather
me
Sunless.
again. Hi.
Welcome back.
It is another third-person action game that's an absolute masterpiece of its genre with very few downsides or faults. But to explain it briefly, Armored Core 6 is a third-person mecha action game developed by From Software. You may have heard of them before. The point and general gameplay loop is you build and customize your mech to go and take on story missions of various kinds, from escort to stealth to combat to boss fights. Earn some money, gather some secrets, come back, change your mech again, go on more missions. If your mission fails, you built your mech wrong, do it better. But as for why it's Game of the Year, well, this is mine for 2023, and it, God, I've wanted this game for so long. I haven't been able to play any of the Armored Cores because I am pretty much stuck to my PC 100% of the time. And I'm so glad that it made it to PC, and I'm so glad that it's amazing. It's everything that it should be. It's tight controls, good sense of scale, good sense of speed. They kept the customization. They kept it crunchy with way too many numbers. It wouldn't be a good mecha game if it didn't have about twice as many numbers as it really needs. The plot is interesting. The politics are complicated. It looks good. It runs great. The music is unlike anything you've ever heard in a video game before. Just wild, moody, weird, out there stuff. It does New Game Plus better than most, in that you get story developments and new looks into the plot through each new playthrough, unraveling more and more secrets of the enigmatic story of Rubicon, planet on which it takes place. It has good theming, very sort of global warming-esque, also AI, also a few of the other issues that all good mecha games should tackle in these modern times. But yeah, it's great fun for people who love the genre, and it didn't make any sacrifices to get people who aren't in love with the genre into it. It's a great game.
Said. And with Morrowind, we have Clever Diversion.
All right, so hear me out.
Good way to start.
Okay.
It should be noted that this Game of the Year is our Game of the Year.
Yes,
These are games that we played and influenced us over these past
I went to
years.
IKEA.
And
that's how much I want to couch these next few statements. Okay. I bring a sort of Morrowind is the best video game of all time vibe to the conversation that most people don't really like. My game is a great masterpiece example of its genre with a lot of flaws from 2003. But that doesn't hold it back. And the reason is the writing. We're going to ignore the fact that it set up some of the most successful video games in Western RPG history in Oblivion and Skyrim, which is a cultural movement unto itself. And we're going to focus on the fact that this game has the best world writing that I've ever seen in pretty much anything outside of and including the best fantasy works of our time period and generation. The writing here in Morrowind is the most mature political writing it taught me how to interpret history and interrogate religion's position in society in a way that can, in real life, set you free from a lot of the in-world cultural systems of control that dominate most of this globe right now. There is very little ability to understate how powerful this game is when you give it the time that it deserves. And granted, that is a lot of time. Anyone who's familiar with my channel knows that I'm on episode 70 of the Let's Play of this game, and I haven't even gotten to like a third of the the content that this game has. I'm going to pull a little bit on the nostalgia card here, not in a negative way, but this game raised large parts of Dixon and I's artistic interpretation and elevated our appreciation of the video game art form in a way that I don't think very many other games could outside of Majora's Mask or, parts of the best games of every genre. This was the golden age of Western RPGs at 2003, when the position of PC RPGs meant a game for adults that were written and ask you to use real life skills of keeping a journal, navigating the world in a way that's engaging. It gets you to think critically about not believing every character that you hear in this game, because they all have agendas and they all have perspectives based on where they come from in the society and how they were raised. And that is done in a way that is both elegant enough to satisfy the subtlety of adults and yet basic enough to be interpreted by every part of the audience and teach astute children how to be active, critical thinkers, both politically and socially in their world. And that's just something that other video games don't give you. And Marwin did, and it did it really early. And it was revolutionary for its time period for giving you that open space. Now, I'm not going to say there's nothing bad about it, because you can't hit rats for shit with a dagger for the first 5 hours. And if you can't handle that, then you're just a normal person who has reasonable expectations for the art media that you give 5 hours to of your life. So I'll give it that. But when you actually get into the characters of Vivek, when you actually, revolutionarily thought you actually beat the main quest of an Elder Scrolls game, I know that's a tall order for some, but when you get in there and you give it the time and appreciation and patience that it deserves, you will get a gem back that has not been surpassed in any other part of this art form. And to me, it's one of the best games of my life.
Morrowind, you can't hit rats for shit.
The
Learn
tagline.
you're good.
Experience with Morrowind was I tried to hit a crab, and I could have sworn it hit, but it kept saying like, "No, you didn't hit it," and I'm like, "What are you
I'm sorry
talking
to follow
about?"
up your like.
And then I quit.
No, yeah, it's because the 3D genre promises when you hit something, it's physically hitting it. But what it is it's masking a D&D dice roll. And that's the thing, is like the old PC RPGs had the D20 system that we're going to praise so highly in a few minutes here with Baldur's Gate.
Good point.
But it was invisible to the audience, so it wasn't communicated effectively, right? Jacob, I'm sure, has the perfect word in video game design. Something that Rather Sunless did not mention in his intro is he's a professional game designer of some repute.
A small amount, maybe.
Yeah, which deserves some recognition. But that's the thing, is like they were doing the thing that we say we love out of video games earlier than anyone else was. It's just they weren't communicating it clearly enough to their audience that didn't know they were playing that type of game. And they fixed that later in Oblivion and Skyrim, but it sucked because, and there's a an amazing 8-hour-long video that I put on and am tempted to put on for my birthday, which has the meme, "It's my sleepover and I get to pick the movie." You all are watching an 8-hour documentary on how good Morrowind is. That goes into detail about that. And I can, I'm sure I will elucidate some of the terms in that thing, which is, if you don't do that system, every enemy becomes a damage sponge, right? Or at least loses its difficulty when you get high enough level, which is the great crisis of all D&D campaigns, which is when your party becomes over level 10, it's very difficult to challenge them with mud crabs. Mm-hmm. The situation that Line was elucidating earlier is that he was trying to stab a mud crab, which has a very high defensive stat, because it deserves the respect of surviving in this harsh environment. That's how it has survived this long, to be in front of you and you're level 1 or 2. If you're not weak at level 1 or 2 when you first begin the game, when else are you going to be weak, right? And that's the problem, is the first experiences that gamers have with a harsh real world that they claim to want out of RPGs so often is actually not a fun experience that they respond well to. And so by giving the people what they claimed that they wanted so much...
See, here's the thing, though. How many people died over and over and over again to the first boss of Armored Core 6? Because it's a lot. It's Armored Core 6 pulls approximately 0 punches. But
get good.
It communicates it.
Yeah, and like I said, it's 2003. The art form is much younger at this time.
Yeah, I do feel like we wouldn't have Baldur's Gate 3 if it weren't for Morrowind. I feel like it's interesting with this bracket because we have 2 examples. We have an example of a later in the series polished to perfection game that is possibly like the best of its genre. And we have a game that started a genre. I mean, arguably, it's also not the first in its series. But I feel like Morrowind changed first-person RPGs just in gaming forever. Yeah.
And we have to keep in mind studio size relative to their positions at this time. Bethesda now is a massive giant built off of the success of Morrowind, but when Morrowind was in development, they were going out of business. This was their last game. Armored Core 6 was built on the back of triple back-to-back massive industry-changing successes of Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, all of that money going to make this amazing product. And it is an amazing product. And, personally, I think it deserves to win the round. But it's important to note the cultural moment that Morrowind came out for American RPG genre, right? Of being an open world, third person game.
I look at this category and I see it as a category of legacies, but at 2 opposite ends of the legacy. I see Morrowind as the start of Bethesda's legacy, and really the thing that Bethesda has only gone to tarnish.
Yeah, they've yet to recapture the magic of Morrowind.
And then Armored Core 6 is kind of the end, for now, the tail end of its Armored Core legacy, and it kind of shows all of the lessons that the studio has learned, not just in this game's genre, but in all of the other game genres, and the lessons have been applied to Armored Core 6. And you can see that, one of the main principles for Demon Souls in Dark Souls is, how do we make death fun? And you see that being answered for the Armored Core series in Armored Core 6. They know how to, even when you fail, give you feedback to incentivize you to go back to the drawing board, go back into the mission, and try it again with a new strategy and make that death worth something. And, you see them as a studio really applying those legacy lessons that you wouldn't get on a first game. You know, Clever spoke to Morrowind's, rough edges. That is the origin of a legacy. It's where they learn a lot of those lessons. And Oblivion and Skyrim are proof that they learn from that. And Armored Core 6 is those lessons had been learned, and this is the end result. And I really do think Armored Core 6 is just such a beautiful bow tie to the mecha genre and all of the previous games in that series. It, as Rather Sunless said, it's exactly what you're hoping for. It was one of the only games that came out the year it released that I was anticipating, and it was exactly what I was hoping for. It delivered on every note.
Yeah, and I will say, I do believe that Todd Howard learned the wrong lessons from Morrowind. And it's important to note, when I bring this game, I'm bringing its 2002 version, which has a full overhaul mod, the Morrowind Rebirth mod, which has been what I've been playing. I've not been playing vanilla, which communicates a lot better. It adjusts a lot of the difficulty on a lot of the enemies and adds a lot more enemies that were in the hidden files that didn't get polished in a classic Bethesda style and were put out. So the community has made Morrowind better than what it was when it first came out. It has given it the true soul that it deserves, because it was in the game files. It just wasn't finished because they were going out of business. So that's the thing, is there's a lot of mods that are on the cusp of releasing using Skywind, the Skyrim engine, to do all of the graphics again and add a bunch more functionality and fix all the bugs. And that I think can be the game that I bring, is the community fixed version of itself. Because that's what I'm playing,
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'll say this about both of them. If it weren't for the legacies theme, I think the theme of both of these is they're both very singular games. They don't make sacrifices in terms of broader audience appeal, right? Like I was saying, it's not a mecha genre. It's not a mecha game if it doesn't have too many numbers. And it's not Morrowind if it doesn't have impossibly dense political writing and having your dagger phase through a mud crab because you didn't beat a dice roll. If you're
going to say it's not, but that's a game without some bugs.
Yeah. As we'll talk about in the worsties.
Boy, does Morrowind have some big, beautiful bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I'm ready to vote and then give a eulogy if you guys are.
I think I'm ready to vote as well. I'm really leaning towards Armored Core at this point, just because I have the desire to play Armored Core, and despite all of the good things about Morrowind, it doesn't bring me in as a video game as much.
That's totally fair. I think fans of Morrowind are the ones who understand that sentiment the most.
All right, let's cast our votes. 3, 2, 1. And that looks like 5 votes for Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, and 1 vote for Morrowind.
Big, beautiful vote.
Yep.
For its big, beautiful bugs.
You guys are missing out. All right, I'll do the eulogy. Morrowind is a game that I'm trying to preserve for history, because I don't know, with the exception of when Baldur's Gate came out, I was convinced that time had passed for video game writing with that level of maturity serving that specific of an audience. And the stories that Morrowind gives you in organic gameplay terms, by having you figure out how to get to places in its world, and you know and memorize the quests that you need and the names that you need to remember, and remember who lied to you in the past, and be suspicious and critique and interrogate your environment, I think is a great organic feeling that I want to see in so many other games. And Baldur's Gate 3 is the only one that has given me that again in the modern world. And I am very worried about the next Elder Scrolls game, given what Starfield has done this last year.
You should be.
Yeah, I'm scared. And that's the thing is,
Yeah, I
a
think,
lot of the
like,
best writers left right after Morrowind. They didn't
mean,
like Todd
yeah.
Howard's direction,
Yeah,
and they left.
Morrowind was the last good game that Bethesda released.
Yeah, like
I mean, I
said,
wouldn't say
it's
that.
It's the
I would.
legacy that Bethesda is tarnishing,
Mhm.
in my opinion. It's also
I feel like Morrowind is a more important game for history and the world of gaming as a whole. But my reasoning for voting for Armored Core 6 is that I believe it's a more important game for this year and like being sort of a capstone project of like a series that's been working towards having like, I mean, I'm not super familiar with the Armored Core series in general, but this one seems to from what I've heard to be like the crown jewel of the series.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, that'll take us swiftly into the next round.
The next round is my game, Heroes of the Storm by Blizzard Entertainment versus The Quarry, which is a game brought by Carbon Speed Dating.
Yeah. You want to go first?
Sure. So the summary of Heroes of the Storm, this was not this was another version. This was another game that didn't come out last year, but it has hands down been my most played game consistently over the past 5 years at the very least. Here's the Storm is a MOBA. I'd compare it to League of Legends, which is the most popular MOBA at the moment, or Dota if you're familiar. And League of Legends is popular for a lot of reasons, and Blizzard. Oh boy, I'm really stumbling. I'm so excited to talk about this game because I've brought it as an honorable mention for the past ever since we've started doing this podcast, and I really want me bringing it in full force now to go well. A MOBA is a 5 versus 5 multiplayer game where each person brings a unique character to the field and they battle across opposing and try to destroy the other team's core. Matches usually take half an hour to 45 minutes, and your character evolves and changes during those 45 minutes. So I really dislike League. I've tried to play it so many times because it is the more popular option. And Heroes of the Storm has been discontinued by Blizzard. It has a couple patches that have come through in the past half year, but they're very much maintaining the status quo. The reason that Heroes of the Storm is my favorite MOBA, or even my favorite video game, is because it does the beautiful gameplay of MOBAs without any of the just dreadful slog. To name a specific example, in League of Legends, the person who gets the experience from a kill is the very last person who deals even 1 damage to an enemy. I think that's absurd. I think that's overly pedantic, and it's become a main focus of a lot of the things that people do in that game. I don't think that's useful information. I think it should either be shared credit or whoever did the most damage most recently. And this is only one of the things that Heroes of the Storm improves to this genre, is it makes MOBAs in such a fun and clean and effective way that still keeps that extremely high skill ceiling. And I by no means think that any of my friends or anyone listening to this should start playing Heroes of the Storm, because I spent years playing Heroes of the Storm and I wasn't very good at it. And that's not very fun. But several of the characters, several of the moments, and the overall feeling of the game kept me coming back in ways that I couldn't hope to describe here. I love Heroes of the Storm, and I want to play Heroes of the Storm right now. And that will not change in a month. That won't change in a year. I will always be really excited to play this video game. And that's why I brought it this time. So, and the competitor to Heroes of the Storm is The Quarry, and I'll let Carbon Speed Dating take over.
Yeah, so The Quarry is a game by Supermassive. So they've made a previous game called Until Dawn, and The Quarry is very similar in the sense that it's a choose-your-own-adventure game where essentially you are the characters in a horror movie. So in Until Dawn, it's the classic: you go up into the mountains and there's a killer on the loose. And The Quarry it's a summer camp and there's a killer on the loose. But I will say that they are different in the sense that The Quarry is a much more realized version of that. So the original one, Until Dawn, it takes kind of a while for things to get going. There's like a lot of tension, but the replay value on it's kind of low when you realize like how long it's going to take for things to come into like how long it's going to take for like the things to get going. But in The Quarry, the opening, I guess you'd call it a chapter. Maybe it's only about 15 minutes. It's more like a tutorial. You get right into the action. There is things happening immediately. There are choices that are going to haunt you through the rest of the game, depending on how that plays out. Not to mention that it's kind of the epitome of cheesy horror too. So at the end of the day, you can kind of see like it's a choose your own adventure game where you can use your logic to kind of predict things. But I promise you will not be able to predict where plenty of these plot lines are going to go. It is pretty wild. It's crazy. It's fun. It's cheesy. The creators of the game clearly know what they're doing. They have like a genre they're going for. It has some flaws in the sense that like they're kind of funny flaws. But for instance, they have these two accessibility options. One of them is that you can, whenever you try to go into like the tutorial to like learn about a skill, it won't teach you the skill. It'll give you like this cute little horror movie slideshow, but it won't actually tell you how to do anything. And that's kind of a struggle against one of the strengths of the game, which is you can't save scum until you finish the game once. So you can't. So you make a choice, you have to live with that choice for the full game. So it adds this great level of tension. It also has the advantage over its predecessor in which I like a lot more of the characters in this one. They're actually like fun. You kind of care that they're gonna die. I remember having multiple moments where I needed to pause because my hands were getting so sweaty that I couldn't like control it properly. And there's a lot of time sensitive stuff. You can kind of control some of that with the accessibility options, but you might not want to, because for instance, there's an accessibility option where when you get a gun in the game, you'll automatically fire if you have the option to fire. But it's a choose your own adventure game. Firing a gun is a choice, and you don't always want to choose that choice. So, going into this, being aware of that, I'd still had a lot of fun with it. It took me about 2 evenings to complete. It's not a very long game. I had a blast with this game. I'm so excited for their next one. This game came out, I want to say 2 years ago now. I'm beyond excited for the next one. The monsters are great. I will say that if anyone has played Until Dawn, you might notice how similar the rigs are for the monsters. They are. I think it's hilarious. It reminds me of like a cheesy horror movie that's reusing its props, but it's very funny. I look forward to the next game where they're vampires with the exact same monster rig. I hope that's exactly what the next game is going to be. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. If anyone hasn't played it, I'd highly recommend it. It's not a very long game, but you get a lot of bang for your buck. And the choices are really compelling and fun. And the story's great. And it has what's the word where it's like motion capture for the actors? So I imagine a lot of folks might recognize some of the actors in this as well. A blast of a game. I look forward to replaying it probably in another year or two once it's a little fresher for me again.
Kind of settled. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What are people's thoughts on this right now? I'd like a general, quick canvas.
I have thoughts on both.
Ooh.
So yeah, because I've played. Go ahead.
I just want to mention one more thing I forgot, which is that also compared to a lot of choose your own adventure games, there's always this problem where the character, there's like this very big distinction between what me as the player wants to do versus what this character, like, in theory, should have a character. And very often, choose your own adventure games kind of struggle with that because you are making choices for the character. This is kind of one of the first places that I saw where a game kind of overcame that in a really interesting way. So there's a very early choice you have with one of the characters that, as a player, it sounds really stupid because I know I'm in a horror movie and the character is choosing to sabotage their only car to leave. And I remember thinking, well, that's that's probably not going to be good. I don't want to do that. But the character, that's a character choice. So instead of whether or not you can choose to sabotage the car, you choose how you're going to sabotage the car. So they have a lot of these interesting trade-offs in the game where they still find a way for the characters to maintain their own character while still allowing you to make choices. So it's more like the choices that a character would have in that moment, and you're choosing between those.
That's great.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
really cool.
I think that the Quarry should take it, and I'll tell you for why. Because Heroes of the Storm is a game that has both positive and negative impacts on its players. The Quarry seems to be a bunch of fun the whole way through.
Oh, yeah.
And
I
for
mean,
a
they
horror
have-
game, I
Yeah.
think Heroes of the Storm is more horrible in individual instances to the player who is playing it.
Yep. You
Yeah.
you should describe more like what you mean by that.
Sure. So Heroes of the Storm is a game that my good friend Line Arcline plays religiously. And by religiously, I mean most Sundays and holidays. It's in many ways their penitence to their own self-loathing that they constantly engage in ARAM all-mid gameplay with random strangers who want to abuse him, and he is my best friend. And I care about him deeply, and he's going through a lot of stuff. He got a great new job, has a master's degree, and yet these people on the other end of this keyboard see fit to disparage him in the most horrible ways.
It's
all
true.
the time. And, I think Heroes of the Storm, can't help but suffer from the pitfalls that the entire MOBA genre share. I think it's the best example of a MOBA, but I think MOBAs themselves are almost inherently toxic organizations of gameplay space. And Heroes of the Storm was abandoned for a long time. I don't know if it's coming back, but it can't help but be tied to Blizzard. It's made of Blizzard characters. And, when I sometimes want to play Heroes of the Storm with my good friend Line Arcline, he pleads with me not to. He says, "Don't go into the darkness. Clever diversion. I care about you too much. I
It's
don't want you to
absolutely true.
spend the time of getting addicted to this thing." It's like watching a friend be possessed by a demon and him warning you away from outside the room. He's like, "Don't come in here. It's terrible. I'm fighting the demon alone. It's my burden to bear."
But it's so fun sometimes.
Mhm.
I think it's very telling that HOTS has been rejected by the MOBA genre, kind of as a whole,
I would agree.
because I think it is a genre that is so toxic that when they're finally introduced to a slightly less toxic version, they say, "No, not for me. More salt." More salt,
More salt
please.
for the wound.
If I
Whereas,
can't harass someone over their poor choices in build, what am I doing with my life?
what do you mean I can't message the enemy team?
Well, and
Why?
Here's the thing.
I
it's-
want to say slurs to them.
It's not even necessarily a bad choice in build. It's just from their perspective, it's not their build. So it must be terrible because they're 19 and they know everything, right? And you're like, it's just how long can this stand? Like your self-esteem. I've been doing a lot of therapy lately, and this is like anti-therapy.
You're not
And
wrong.
then you look at Quarry and the genre of choose your own adventure RPG.
Underserved, really.
That
Oh, God,
underserved.
I look for them every year, and then I just they're not there. That's why I was so
Well-
excited when this. I mean, Supermassive in general, this is kind of their bread and butter, from what I can tell right now. This is between this and Dark Pictures. This is kind of what they work on, and they're all so much fun. I haven't played all of them yet, but I've had nothing but fun with them.
Well, yeah, and in the genre, this studio is leading the charge. I like pretty handedly, I would say.
Also,
With,
can we talk about how good the title is? The Quarry.
Yeah,
It takes
Oh,
place
yeah.
in the quarry, but
Yeah.
also they're being hunted.
the quarry.
Yeah.
The quarry.
Yeah.
Hey!
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah,
get that
and it's-
until now.
And it's got all of the prop. This game is also kind of hilarious because compared to the first one, it has every horror like trope you could imagine. They somehow stuffed it in there,
I
and
mean,
it's
it's
kind of
campy.
fascinating. It's campy, but also
It's
really impressive
good.
how they like
Yeah.
actually made all of that work together really well in the story.
Do they
Yeah,
still make like is the story still are you still solving a puzzle? Is it still mysterious even though it has tropes
So-
that are like predictable?
Oh yeah, like I said, you will not be able to predict where some of these plot points are going to go, or at least I
Nice.
didn't. I had a lot of fun, which what makes the choices that you do have, where you know, like, oh, I'm going to, I don't know, take the keys out of this car, but then you think to yourself, well, what if in 5 hours I need to run into the car because a monster's chasing me, which, things like that do totally happen. So it adds
Yeah,
a lot.
so
So even
I
if you
think-
do predict stuff, it's predicting like, there's
think
such a
it's-
swath of things to predict that
I think we're
it's
clear on our
artistically-
voting. So let's save more
Sure,
discussions
sure,
on Quarry
sure.
for the next
I love
round.
that. Yeah. Let's go through our votes. What do you guys think?
The Quarry.
Quarry.
Yep.
Yeah.
James,
I am going to vote for Heroes of the Storm
do it. That's
because
your game.
I'm
That's-
going to.
You're so brave.
No, I thank you.
So brave.
Wow.
Here's the Storm is the game that I will launch directly after we finish recording this. I can't wait to play some Abathur. I can't
And I'll
wait
probably
to play
join
Stukov. I have so much fun, and hey, listen, I've written out responses to the toxic people. I'm toxic too, but in a kind way.
In a supportive
Are
way.
are they in a
Toxic
note?
Positivity
Did
is
you
a thing.
can you copy paste them with a macro?
Yeah, no, I have them up on my second monitor. It's an important part to playing a MOBA is having the responses to the horrible responses that you'll meet. And that's why let me be clear. I am so relieved that you guys voted for the Quarry because nobody should follow me down this road. Don't come in. This is my demon to fight, but I'm gonna have a hell of a good time fighting it.
Yeah.
I love Here's the Storm, and I might bring it next year again.
So
To be
Okay.
clear, 0.2 of my vote goes to Here's the Storm because
Wow.
it is legitimately fun and moving the MOBA series, the MOBA genre, in a direction that I want it to move.
Yeah.
With streamlining and better, easier to understand build
Yeah, and,
choices and faster matches. Oh my god!
I will say, and I know this is just a MOBA problem, but sometimes you'll show clips of this and it's just noise to me.
Yeah,
I can
it's
see
just-
things happening and I have no
Well,
idea. They're
and
like,
I'm
oh,
the same. Like,
they're-
but
they
honestly,
try-
like the fact
like,
that
oh, look
it's
at that
an
good-
MMO and that there's toxic people everywhere in it, and that it's by Blizzard, and that you still
Oh,
love
yeah.
this game and want to play it,
Yeah.
that really says something.
yeah,
I
was
do
gonna
want to
say
mention that
to
I
couch
hate Blizzard and all of the things it makes these days. Here's the Storm was the last product that they made that was good.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, as hard as I went against it, now that it's defeated, now that the dragon is dying, I would like to say all the good parts about it, which is I've seen you make some of the most amazing connections and friendships through this game because the good people on it are actually really good. And the moments that you've shown through Here's of the Storm clips and your own clips are genuinely amazing, and it creates genuine, real, like out of your seat excitement when things go right, because it is so hard and it is so difficult to get those moments. And you individually have gained a huge amount of skill and success through your dedication to this work, and it's a joy to watch you play. I often come downstairs with, some half of fruit or grapes just to watch you
The
play a
orange
match.
was so
you know,
good
and I
last
know I'm
night.
not
Thank
alone in
you.
that because your girlfriend does too.
I would like
stand by.
to bring up you may be fighting this demon alone, but it is winning. You might want to double check the score right now.
What? What? Wait. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Doors. I'm sorry.
I stand by my vote because it's the
Thank you.
only game that I've played that Line Arc Line has muted me for participating in the toxicity back at a toxic person.
My own brother has been ostracized from the community.
After being told explicitly to not engage with the toxicity, I rolled my sleeves up and said, no, I need to tell this person.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I got this. Everyone stand back.
Hell yeah.
Hold my
I'm going to
fresca.
be more toxic than them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also,
So-
to be
Alright,
fair,
well,
the San
thank
Diego
you.
group, when Dan was in, we got some toxicity legacy behind us as well. People don't step to us because we're above that shit, but we can
Alright,
get down
alright.
dirty.
I've spent too much time on my favorite
Okay.
game. We have to move on. And the
That's
next
fair.
round is another hard hitter set, Disco Elysium versus Immortality. So with Disco Elysium, that is who brought that? That was
It is
Mason?
me.
Ah, excellent.
Yes. Okay, hang on. We're moving mics around. Okay. So, Disco Elysium is a kind of mystery RPG set in a sci-fi fantasy realistic world. I don't want to say the genre would be to spoil. But came out in 2019. It's by a company called Zaum. It's a indie game from Estonia, and it's very heavy on storytelling and RPG aspects. You're playing as this cop who is completely amnesiac. He remembers nothing about his personality or who he is or why he's there, and it's your job to kind of piece together his life, piece together the crime that he's supposed to be solving, while remembering who you are, why you're there, what the world even is, and figuring out what kind of person you want to be through the end of it. And you'd think that for a game where you're playing as a cop, it would be, kind of copy. This game goes very, very hard left. This game is very pro-communism. This game makes fun of him for being a cop the entire time. Something that this game is praised for is that the political system of this game is very interesting, and you can choose through your actions sort of what political alignment your character will have, which will affect the outcome of your game. And it allows you to experiment with different things and sort of figure out who your character is, but there is one political alignment that it will deliberately make you suffer for. And so if you are fascist, this game makes you take moral hit points every time you do say or think something fascist. So, which I very much enjoy.
Take damage.
Yeah, you take psychic damage from being fascist.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And in being an RPG, you have stats that you add to throughout the game, but these stats aren't just like strength and dexterity and constitution. These stats are actual characters within your mind. Like, the way that it's played out is your whole psyche is these different characters that you can give points to and level up inside your mind. And the more that you level up your, let's say, your like encyclopedic knowledge, the more that little voice in your head will chime in whenever it notices something interesting. Or the more you pump up your ego, the more that voice will chime in the background of your thoughts. And so you get to know these different aspects of your character, and depending on which you choose to strengthen, it will affect your roles later on in the game. And sorry, once again, I lost my track of thought. Something that I very much appreciate about a game that is so heavily story-based and so heavily dialogue-based is that As a dyslexic person, I absolutely adore when a game is voiced, and this game is fully voiced. This game has so much dialogue and so much information, and the entire thing is voiced, and I just absolutely love that for such a heavy story-driven game. And it has beautiful art, beautiful music. The whole thing looks like a painting, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It changes what I've thought RPGs could be based off of its weird stat structure. Yeah, it does a lot of really interesting things, and is just a beautiful game. I don't want to say too much about the story for spoiler reasons, but I enjoy the politics of this game. I think it's very politically relevant, especially right now. It's also kind of fun. Sometimes you get to be a silly little dude, and it's very, very good and awkward in some cases, but it's very good.
Yeah, in the intro description of the game, I'd just like to read off the stat categories, which are logic, encyclopedia, rhetoric, drama, conceptualization, visual calculus, inland empire, empathy, authority, esprit de corps, pain threshold, physical instrument, electrochemistry, shivers, half-light, savoir-faire, reaction speed, perception, hand-eye coordination, interfacing, and composure.
Yes.
Those are your
Don't
stats.
all of these stats have different voice actors as well?
Well, all of the internal monologue stats, they're all the same voice actor, but
Wow.
he has a really,
Wait,
really wide
really?
range. Like, he's
Oh
a
my
very good
Gosh,
actor.
I would not have guessed that.
That's
Yes, they're all the
incredible.
same guy.
Insane.
Yeah.
And the voice that he has as the narrator is incredible. It's so beautiful and deep. Like
I must
Line
have
Line
that
is doing the trailer right now, and the
Yeah.
voice is just so good in it. But yeah, let's kick it off to the next one.
Yes.
Yes, let's get that immortality summary.
Yeah, so Immortality is how do I describe this game? It is, I will say at the end of all of this, I will consider Immortality perhaps the most innovative game on this entire list. Essentially what it is you have a series of full-length movies on the back end that are retrieved to you in small clips. And you watch the clips, they're all out of order, and you can click on any part of the screen and it will find, like, say for instance you click on an actress's face, it will find another clip somewhere in the back archive where that same actress's face is appearing, and then you'll get another small clip. And essentially what's happening is as time goes on, you're slowly unraveling the story of this. So all we know about the story when we start, that there's this main actress, and she was in a number of movies. There was some mysterious accident on set, and she stopped acting. And as time goes on, you can even start to find references to this mysterious act. You can even start to find some clips and setup. And there is a lot more going on in this story than I know when I first played it. It took me a while to get into the, I guess I would argue, true story of what's happening in this game. And as I will be very often the case with a lot of these games that are so story based. To get into any more details would be spoiling it, but not only is it incredibly well acted, there is essentially, if I remember right, 3 full movies, and then there's a bunch, so you can also find some smaller like commercials and clips and stuff from other parts of her career. It is incredible. It's all real acting as well, so they're all real clips. Was it FMAs or what were they called? FMVs. Yeah, so they're all FMVs. It's incredible. This is also by the same folks that did Her Story, if folks are familiar with that, where you're going through a police archive with keywords. This one is, I would argue it's kind of a maturing of their style of gameplay, where instead of any interaction, you basically have the option to click on the screen and and rewind and fast forward through the clips. And there are reasons to do all of that stuff, and it's quite excellent. I would highly recommend it to anybody. It's a bit longer of a playthrough. I think it took me, a bit longer a playthrough for games that I play typically, which is to say that I think it took me a weekend to get through, but it's wonderful.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it seems really, really interesting.
I know as for me, between Disco Elysium and Immortality, I'm having a very difficult time. On one hand, Disco Elysium, I've heard about it endlessly from my good friends. Uh, they they tell me how much I should play it. I've tried playing it a bit, and I it's a very deep game. It's very slow, and it doesn't get started very quickly. But I know that I'll have fun once I get really into it. And then Immortality sounds a lot like a few games that I've been really enjoying recently. And that would be Outer Wilds, which I believe won our previous,
Yeah,
or at
it
least
did.
came close.
Mhm.
Yeah, which won our previous one, which is a game that you solve a mystery. And it's so much more than that, but solving a mystery is a good summary of it.
Yeah, I
And
like that both of
Tunic.
these are
Yeah,
mystery solving games. That could be a
that's
good name
Yeah.
for the
yeah.
Oh,
title.
perfect.
Mysteries to be solved.
Indie
Mysteries to be
mysteries.
solved is the name of the round.
I will say too that there was a moment in Immortality where I was playing it. It was something like 1 or 2 in the morning. I was sort of lying sideways on the couch to play, uh, and I sat like straight up for one of the moments. Like
Oh,
it had
nice.
real
That's so
surprises in it
good.
that like marvelous.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with you, Liner Klein, that like Disco Elysium can be quite a slog if you're not like ready for it. And I haven't played Immortality yet. I am very much looking forward to it, especially after this pitch. Um, but I feel like perhaps a good way to describe these two is that Disco Elysium is a game for people who like reading books and want a game that is like reading a book. And it seems like Immortality is like a game for people who like watching movies and want to have a interactive movie game,
I will say
and just
too that
different
yeah,
styles of interacting with games.
I will say too that this is a game that I played with a number of people who don't normally play games.
Nice.
Because it's and specifically almost the selling point to it was like it's not kind of gamey. Like there's no real barrier to entry for people that, for instance, might not be familiar with how to use a controller. There's basically you use the triggers and the A button. It was very approachable for if somebody needs a game to get people into gaming potentially, or people that might not normally be into that kind of genre.
Yeah, and also I very much love what was it called? FMVs becoming more of a thing. Like I was going to bring Myst this year, but I'll bring it next year because I
Ooh.
love FMVs as I think that honestly I think that the Quarry could have been better if it was FMV.
Yeah, it's one step. It's one step above it. I think the only reason they didn't do that was for the monsters.
That's very fair. That would be a little bit more challenging, but it's just it sort of like breaks down the barrier of realism to have just an actual picture of a person. Like as great as like motion capture is, there's still an uncanny valley there, and yeah, Immortality looks really good.
Mhm.
All right. Do you want to try voting? I think it'll be
I think we
contentious.
should.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Oh man.
Regardless of what we vote on, I will eventually try to sneakily get you guys to play some Immortality
Oh,
this
I'm
year.
completely
I'm
sold.
totally
I'm
down
going
for that.
to. Yeah, I
Mhm.
have it installed right now.
Oh, great.
Yep. It's also out for iOS, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
feels a little. I mean, it's like watching Oppenheimer on your phone on a plane, I suppose.
That's
But
fair.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's go down the list. Carbon speed dating. What do you think?
certainly Immortality. I have Disco Elysium. I haven't had an opportunity to play it. I know it's
Mhm.
certainly going to be a bit of a time commitment too. So it's on my list, but certainly for now, it's Immortality.
Yeah. What about clever diversion?
I have to give it to Disco Elysium for like overall global worldview political reasons. The things that it's talking about are so significant and important that it actually gets people to interrogate their genuine full political capital I ideological beliefs in ways that are more robust and detailed than any other piece of media that I've ever seen, including like textbooks in college about these political ideologies where it's like, okay, cool. You think that you like anarchism. Let's fully think that through. Do you recognize all of the parts of that you are potentially happily ignoring for yourself or letting slide? And when those are presented to you in a very real way, it asks you to think about the felt reality of communistic forces from a country that took a huge historical lesson and legacy in just what actual authoritarian authoritarian communism is in a felt sense, that I think really benefits the American reader.
Shaunosaur?
I actually voted for immortality on this one. It's silly not to vote for my own thing, and I do think that Disco Elysium is very, very important culturally and is a fantastic game. But I really like what immortality is doing for gaming as a genre. Any game that's able to bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers, people who would never touch a video game, never even think to try a video game, getting them to be involved and engaged in a game really, I don't know, that is oddly a marker of a very strong game to me. Because I think that gaming is not a genre but a medium, and I feel like a lot of people look over that. And also, having the real actors in gaming is very cool. I enjoy what it's doing for gaming as a medium.
Yeah. Hail Noxid.
I went with Disco Elysium. I think that the themes that it touches on, but also like the technical aspect of the writing, the art style, is very unique and very artistic. Like, it is plain art in its style. And then you have incredible voice acting and music on top of that. I think it's a masterclass in kind of a dark horse studio at the time. I don't think anyone really expected Disco Elysium to have had the impact that it did when it came out.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I also don't know very much about what the studio has done other than Disco Elysium. I do know that there was something recently where they were bought out or acquired by somebody, which is kind of against the the political messages of Disco Elysium in a lot of ways. So kind of a shame there, but I'll have to look into what other things the studio has done.
All right. Rather Sunless.
Yeah. There are good arguments for both.
Yeah.
They both do the thing that's sort of been my thesis for this year, which is it's the rise of the singular game. The game that is for its audience and doesn't make sacrifices in terms of its core design. We've seen that in a lot of modern games. But unfortunately, both of these do that really well and really strongly. So, what do I vote for? I think in this case, I have to give it to Disco Elysium just because of its impact. But it's a real close one.
Yeah. I really thought by the end of going through your votes, I would have a better answer. And who knows what we do in a tie. I think that the reason I want to vote for Immortality is because it is exactly the sort of game that I've been enjoying most right now. I love sitting down with my partner and playing games that we can think through a mystery and discover more about the world at our own pace and on our own. There's very few things that video gaming does in opposition to other media. And one of those beautiful tools is allowing difficulty and allowing the actual player to solve the mystery. Not a character that the player is watching solve a mystery, but actually the player solves the mystery. It asks that of you. However, I think Disco Elysium is a longer game and has this beautiful writing and a unique outlook. So I think I also have to give it to Disco Elysium, because I think it has some of those aspects as well. And I'm going to play them both. I think I might play Immortality first, but I'm going to give it to Disco Elysium this time as well, because it came out of nowhere. It made such a strong and lasting impression for so many people that I know. And the writing's dang good. And that brings us to the winner as Disco Elysium for this round. And that is the quarterfinals. Wait, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the preliminary round.
That was a close one,
It's also
though.
the quarterfinals, I think. Yeah.
That was one of the most
Closest we've had
contentious
so
ones so
far.
far.
Mhm.
I think so.
Mhm.
Great. All right. Well, let's see. So next we have a slight intermission that we decided on, where we decided to bring the worst games that we played in these years. Not necessarily the worst of all, but the ones that really caused us a lot of disappointment.
Now, my question with this is, are we competing over which one is the best of the worst? Or are we competing over which one is the worst of the worst, winning the worsties?
Oh man,
I think
I think
worst
we
of the
should have
worst
an
is more
entire
fun.
other podcast. But I gotta admit, I'm into it. Let's compete with the worst of the worst. Let's just start with I'm bringing Dave the Diver, and Clever Diversion is bringing Starfield. And Dave the Diver is a very ambitious game, not from an indie studio like it makes it out to be. It's actually from a very large game studio. And originally, I played it quite a lot, and I was like, wow, what a good game. It keeps adding mechanics, it keeps adding things. And then it added so many things that the game was no longer fun. And I started to see through it and realize that the original game was just the promise that fun would arrive once you got more things. And so it, I think we're splitting this into several different streams, but Dave the Diver was really disappointed me. So do you guys think we should split the worsties up into a completely different stream, or just rapid fire these? Because we only have 4.
I think we have to rapid fire them, but also I want to add the last cutscene of Remnant 2. I know it's a bold choice. No, it's
amazing.
It's a first ever world thing that I'm not bringing a full game in this category. I'm bringing a little piece of the game, right?
Yep.
This one.
I'm just going to bring a little piece of it that is the worst piece of it as the worsties, because it was a fine, it wasn't a great game. It was a good game. It was a fine game. We all played that game. We played it a lot as our friend group. I want everyone to remember how much we played that game last year, because we did. And then the last cutscene happened, and it was the worst game. It was a worse game after the last cutscene.
Now, with most
what was your name again?
It was Clementine.
Clementine, no.
It was like
Do it. Get him one for me, traveler.
I urge our viewers, if you watch the last cutscene of Remnant 2, where you're about to fight this final boss, you have about as much attachment to this set of players, having not played the game, as we
you do right
had
now.
attachment at any point. These are two people you've barely met, and they're like, go take him down for me. And I'm like, who are you? Like, it was some of the worst writing. Remnant 2 was a really fun multiplayer game.
A good game, a terrible plot.
Terrible plot.
Yeah.
I do remember coming home, and I think both of you separately showed me this cutscene.
It was so impactful for me because it took something away from me.
Yeah.
The other
it
games
actually made the game worse.
Yeah, the other games were like, okay, and like Kingdom 2 Crowns, I also need to talk about because I purchased this game as a well-meaning gift for my friend. You know, I had good intentions and spent good American US dollars to buy the new expansion for Kingdom 2 Crowns, a game that we beloved in this household, that we could play together, that was chill.
It is the perfect living room game.
It was one of the few games that we could play with carbon speed dating that they'd actually play with us, you know? And like, that was fantastic. And I really appreciated that. And I was with high hopes and bright eyes. I was going into this game. And then
it's the Norse expansion.
Something happened. We slowly started to figure out that it was trash now.
Yep.
It was a bad game. It was a worsty.
Whoops, bad game. It was a worsty. And then
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yes, please go ahead. Yeah, I'll bring my last one, which was Cult of the Lamb, which has some of the best art and some of the most hopeful parts of video game release that I could find. And they have been improving it, but I played Cult of the Lamb and I finished it so much faster than I thought I was going to. And it's a good game, but there's not much of it. There's just nothing there.
And people were talking about that for Game of the Year when it was coming out before people got to the end.
Yep.
Yeah. I added one last minute. If I don't like a game, I don't play it very much. And honestly, I was able to dodge a lot of bad games this past 2 years. The one that I'm writing here is Bear and Breakfast, mostly because I was so excited for this game. It's a game where you play as a bear who owns a bed and breakfast. It's the cutest concept ever. I was so ready to be a bear who owns a bed and breakfast. But this game, like, it's clearly not meant for, like, it's kind of a cute, whimsical audience, but it's not meant for, like, kids because a lot of it's, like, you're min-maxing this, like, hotel that you're running. Like, there's clear strategies to things. There's, like, little mechanics everywhere. And so, like, it's a complicated game, but the tutorial never ends.
Wow, yeah.
Like, I played a solid chunk of this game, and I still felt like I was in the tutorial, completing tasks, doing homework, rather than actually enjoying my time playing the game. Yes. And maybe I just didn't get to the 10-hour mark where they stopped the tutorial, but after playing, like, 6 to 8 hours of this game, I want to say, and still feeling like I'm in the tutorial, like I'm still just checking the boxes, trying to figure out what they want me to do next, never really fully being able to be let off the hook to actually enjoy the creativity and concept and, like, mechanics of the game. It made me not go back to it, which was a big bummer because it seems extremely cute and fun. And so yeah, the tutorial writing, very bad. It holds your hand to the point where you really want it to let go and it gets uncomfortable.
I think we're in a era of video gaming that appreciates a game that does its thing very, very well, like whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And when I think we're, like, very hyper aware of when we can detect a game has not done enough and there's just nothing to it, or they're doing too much and putting too much game and losing its identity that way.
I completely agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a lot of these have great concepts and great art and great, like, writing and execution, but then it just falls short at the last second with the mechanics and the actual game part of the game not really being there.
And to tack onto that, I want to kick it over to Sunless so that he could talk about Redfall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So 2 things. First thing, I am an unabashed, unashamed sucker for looter shooters. I love picking up gun with number attached so that I can use number against health bar and make that health bar drop a bigger number gun. I love it. I love all of them. I still play Destiny 2, which I'm sure invalidates all of my opinions. I played Borderlands, even the bad one. I played, God, what was that other one? Outriders. I played Outriders. I played 20 hours of Outriders.
I played more than that.
Did you
And
play the
Outriders-
looping one that was in the 60s?
Is that that's not a looter shooter, is it? That's the other.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Continue.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't remember what the company is called. Arcane.
Yeah.
Second thing, Arcane Studios. Arcane Studios make some of the most beloved, critically acclaimed games of all time. I should love them. I should love Arcane. I hate Arcane. I can't play their games. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about them. I've thought about it. I've sat there and I've tried to play their super cool teleporty spy assassin game. I've tried to play everything they've released and I've hated every single one. And here comes Arcane finally making a game in my genre, the looter shooter. Maybe I will get to experience their top tier traversal and level design and stealth mechanics, but with the sense of progression and drive and excitement that comes from a high octane shooter. Unfortunately, it sucked real bad from minute 1 to all of them. All the minutes sucked
Wow.
about that game.
It seemed like it needed to be in the oven a bit longer.
It seemed like they needed to take it out and start again. Their recipe was bad. The ingredients were bad. It was clearly a game made under studio pressure because it had not an ounce of passion put into it. No one cared. No one wanted it. No one wanted it to be made.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is visually very cool looking, but I remember looking at it when it was teased, and I was like, "Who's asking for this?
Yeah.
Who's asking for this to be made now?"
Wait, is that Dave Bautista playing?
Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
I don't
Oh,
think
cool.
it is really, but
It's just
Yeah.
kind of anyway.
So the thing that I'll say
yeah.
about this is anyone who's followed my channel knows that I'm canonically incapable of not playing a vampire when given the option to, which you'll find out in my Baldur's Gate 3 Let's Play. And many of you have already witnessed my attempts at in my Morrowind Let's Play. This game ruined vampires, which is hard to do for me.
yeah.
And that's a feat in and of itself that earns its own worsty. Because when it came out, it was so dumb and broken, it took over almost all of Highlight Reel
Yeah.
for like weeks and weeks and weeks of it just being laughably, horrendously bad for the level of studio it is. I don't know if it's AAA or not, but God, it was pretending to be.
It's AAA.
Yeah, it's
AAA.
Yeah.
It's Arcane.
It's made by the people who made Dishonored, a
Yeah.
critically beloved series.
See, that's what I wanted. I wanted Dishonored, but with more
Like, for
fun,
me.
blasty, and high octane, and exciting. And you're shooting vampires with stake guns, and you've got cool
Yeah.
powers. And someone makes a psychic elevator so that they can ground slam someone. That's cool.
Yeah.
Or it
Speaking
would
of
be.
AAA games that flubbed so hard, I'm going to transition seamlessly to Starfield, a game you may have heard of this last
Oh,
year.
wait. Let me bring up a trailer.
Our good old friend Bethesda. You'll notice I'm bringing 2 Bethesda games on opposite ends of the spectrum this year. And those are for very good reasons. One of which is I think that people who bought Starfield deserve a class action lawsuit to get their money back.
I don't. I think they're suckers. I think everything.
Suckers born every minute.
I think everything about that game leading up to the release of that game informed you of what that game was going to be.
But they released a special controller. Did you see the
yeah,
35-minute documentary
sure.
that they released before it with Todd Howard himself with his lying face and lying mouth?
I love that
no
they
lies.
released. I love that they released merch while they were still handling a class action lawsuit for the merch from Fallout 76.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's how Bethesda gets all its money nowadays, don't you know?
Jesus, the controller's $140.
100% honestly, the best parts about Starfield are how cool that controller looks and how cool their watch looks.
Yeah.
Looks and emphasis on looks. It's an absolutely standard controller. Anyway,
Yeah,
Starfield
doesn't do
broke
anything
the
special.
hearts of millions this year, and I think that's why it deserves the worsties, because let's be honest, what's worse than Starfield?
You know what? You're right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even joking. That argument absolutely wins this for me
Well,
because
yeah.
Starfield, the one saving grace from Starfield, and the thing that does kind of make me want to play it, is because the items in this game are so far up my personal aesthetic design, like my aesthetic aspirations. I love the objects in this game, but that's all it is. The writing is poor. The standard Bethesda fare of, like you fill up on these items you don't care about until you can't walk, and then you go and try and sell them, and then it's difficult to do that, and you don't care after 15 minutes. And they didn't even do the saving grace of presenting the world in an attractive way, because you start out at a minimum wage job and it's just as boring the whole way through.
In a mine.
Yeah.
It's a space game, and you start in a mine. It's
Walking
not
really
even.
slowly.
It's not even an asteroid mine or a space mine.
I thought
or
that
like
at this point people had made fun of the opening of Skyrim enough that would have been at least one lesson they would have taken. Start the game by showing off your cool world. Because even when you get to the out of the mine, the world is open and revealed, and you're on a grungy-looking gray planet, the brown sky. Woo, SpaceX exploration.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll
Like, oh my
direct
God.
everyone who's viewing this audio or listening to this audio to pursue the many, many medias who have directed hours and hours and hours to just how bad Starfield is that we don't have the time to go over right now, because this is a Besties. But
Yeah,
the literal
wanna say-
Besties that we rip
Yeah.
off to make this program has an hour footage before any of the reviews came out, which just goes into how bad it is. And Nakey Jakey, one of my favorite video media essayists from a very long time, has a really beautiful, like 40-minute video media essay. Go look those up. It's just
Yep.
sad, and it makes me
Yeah.
scared that this is the direction of American RPGs.
But then within, I don't know, a month, Baldur's Gate came out, and it going back to the dialogue in this game felt criminal.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
we'll get to Baldur's Gate in a bit, but
Sure. Baldur's Gate is
Starfield was not
Yeah.
doing itself any favors by coming out within, I think, a month of Baldur's
Yeah.
Gate.
Begging
officially.
immediate comparison in
Yeah.
the same genre space. But yeah, in the interest of time, are we clear with calling it, or are we okay with calling it there for Starfield?
I think yes, especially
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
Starfield. How do you guys feel about going a couple more rounds of the spicy or the preliminary before we talk about the salsas?
I would be okay with at least I don't know. I'm feeling caffeinated and up to doing more rounds of besties.
We should at least get through half.
I mean, yeah, you
like
know me.
it.
This is like the
As
start of
desperate
the
as I
evening.
am to talk about salsa.
Absolutely, and we will get there. So our next round is really something. Two powerhouses, I'm gonna say, and that is Elden Ring and The Sims 4. And I believe that I brought Elden Ring this year because I wanted to win. And
Hear me
So
out. They
I'm-
both have horses in them. They're both good games.
that's a good
They're
point.
both slice of life games.
That's a
Both
great
Both slice of
that's a good point.
life.
you do a
Both
lot
of
of
the-
life slicing in Elden. It's perfect.
Yep.
Let me just bring up the actually the Sunless. If I know you've been doing a wonderful job bringing these images, could you also hit me with trailer links? Because that would be so helpful. All right. So I'm going to give a summary of what Elden Ring is and why I brought it this time. Because I genuinely do think that it is one of the strongest entries to this. So Elden Ring is an open world game in the series of FromSoft or From Software, same folks as mech shooty game,
Armored Core 6.
Armored Core, yeah. But it is much more in line with its beautiful series, Dark Souls. And up until this game, I had a great respect for Dark Souls, but had never played one. And Elden Ring was the first game that I started to play that made me fall in love with the Dark Souls genre. And there are a lot of reasons that I'd love to talk about, but I think among the most important are From Software has an ability to make worlds and video games that have such an impressive depth of content, care, and love in their level design and environments that it makes other games seem shallow and pointless. The things that Elden Ring and Dark Souls in kind show and make you realize about yourself are deep, wonderful truths that are a treat to explore. Elden Ring does not disappoint, and I think is well, I was about to say the best of the Dark Souls genre, but I think I would have a quite long conversation with Clever Diversion, our local Dark Souls expert in that regard. But what I want to say about this game is that it is gigantic. I love when a game, I think that it's a huge map, a huge experience. And then something happens in the game where I realize that that was just a small portion of the game, and it is monumentally an order of magnitude larger than what I thought it was before. And that feeling of awe that I get is among my most sought after feelings in video games, and Elden Ring gave that to me time and time again. It is wholeheartedly worth playing because it asks things of you. It asks you to be skilled. It asks you to consider. It asks you to solve, and it asks you to be amazed. It is an open world game with Dark Souls mechanics and some of the most beautiful, unique art. It's written by George R.R. Martin, so that's pretty cool.
I did not know that. That's very cool.
Yeah, that was its original sales point, but like
he did the world building and backstory.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't give too much at a time. It is haunting and beautiful, and I love it. And the expansion is coming out, and I can't imagine what will be there. And with that, let's go to Sims 4. What do you guys, is we've already done an introduction to Sims 4, but do you want to add anything before we start the discussion, Shaunasaur?
I mean, I was gonna just say something as a joke, being like, The Sims 4 is a game that is fun. Because I feel like Elden Ring has been such a, it's been such an important game these past 2 years since it came out. It's, rocked fantasy gaming. I've seen it, I feel like Dark Souls was really great for a lot of the dark fantasy fans, and the whole idea that you gotta get good scrub was really important for that. But Elden Ring bringing that into a high fantasy fandom, I've seen so many people enjoying it so much. But to have extra fun points about The Sims 4, a thing that I forgot to mention earlier, just to say another kind thing about this game that I love so much, is that it's rare that games actually change my waking non-gaming life. And with Sims, a game that's about just normal everyday life with a fistful of fantasy as well, to have a game about just living your life, doing your job, doing your chores, going on little adventures, it makes the everyday things feel like gaming. It makes me able to gamify my own life. And so when I'm feeling down and not feeling like doing my work, or not feeling like going outside and exercising or doing the dishes, to be able to visualize oneself as a sim and sort of like compartmentalize that and gamify your own life, for me is a way to sort of crack the code of making myself do tasks. Just visualize yourself as a little sim.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's actually very tangibly helpful for me in just everyday life.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we should do a poll so we can talk more about the one that will not be proceeding to the next round.
That's fair. My vote. Well, you guys should go first.
Who's going first? It was unclear.
Yeah, I'll just go. I mean, I have to give it to Elden Ring. It consumed my life for 200 plus hours straight. Like few games have done before. And few games have done since.
Yeah.
It dominated every discussion. It pushed back releases. It reshaped the open world genre. It opened discussions about what it means to be an open world action game. Truly, again, people are still talking about the lore in a way that's engaged, and interested and trying to figure out mysteries. And yeah, gotta give it to Elden Ring.
Yeah. I feel like even though The Sims is very important to me personally, it is also a game that, like I said, has been out for 10 years and had iterations before that, like Elden Ring had Dark Souls. And even though I haven't played very much of Elden Ring myself to be able to like fully sink my teeth into it as a game, watching my friends fall head first into this beautiful game and being able to sort of secondhand see their joy and see the rippling effects that it's had on, I feel, just gaming culture in general since it came out. I feel like it is the most like pivotal game for these years.
Yeah. I have to give it to Elden Ring because I think they're both the capstones of their genre. Again, legacy comes to mind, and throughout this in all of the games that we've been speaking about during this podcast, I think they're both the crowning achievements of what a company and a studio has been trying to do for a very long time, and by now they're pretty damn good at both. But I got to vote for the Dark Souls on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Carbon
I
speed
think-
dating.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like I totally agree with Elden Ring and Sims. I think that I'm leaning towards Sims personally just because it's the game of the two that I'm more likely to play. Not anything
Yeah.
against Elden Ring, it's just a very intense kind of game that at least personally feels a little outside of my capabilities as a gamer right now.
Yeah, I do feel like the accessibility of Elden Ring can be a little challenging. Like I said, I've only scratched the surface because I keep getting attacked by rats and dying. Like we said before with Morrowind, sometimes you just can't stab rats.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We're seeing that on the screen right now, actually. Someone dying to
Yeah.
lobsters over and over and over again.
Yep.
All right,
Those-
so I think
those
we're
lobsters,
decided.
man.
I think so too. I think the most votes are going towards Elden Ring
Yep.
because mine is the same. I think Elden Ring has so many moments that I'll think of for the rest of my life. And I feel a little bad because I haven't played that much of The Sims.
Two for The Sims, though, Will.
Oh,
No,
two
it
for The
has one.
Sims?
Oh, wait.
One vote, the
I'm
other
sorry.
two are salutes.
Oh, sorry.
I think so, anyways.
Okay. Well,
Helenik said, did you have anything you were going to say?
Oh,
Sorry if
I'd
I talked over
forgotten.
you.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, I was going with Elden Ring, solely for the fact of the core memory that it made of when I was teleported to the Scarlet Lake,
Yep.
and being in Discord playing alongside while all of us were playing, but in different places in the world, and having that reaction of like, what is this place? And some people knew about it because they had already gotten there, and some people hadn't. And yeah, it's a very cool, like, it's just a very good, well executed game. I'm sure we'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
And to Sims 4's credit, our fervor for Elden Ring, there are an equal amount of people who are that way about Sims 4.
hmm
Oh
Like,
yeah.
that is their game.
It's kind of funny
There
to
is so
watch
much
both of the
content for
trailers
both of
side by
them. It's
side.
quite astounding.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that brings us to the next round. Another FromSoft game, Armored Core 6 versus Red Dead Redemption 2. Boy, this is going to be a this is a difficult round. Let me bring up some of these trailers.
All right, take it away, Sunless. Tell us about Armored Core, how good it is.
It's so good. Yeah, what can I say that I didn't say last time? God, it just captures everything you want a good mecha story to do. I'm gonna focus on the story because I think that's what we're gonna talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 here in a little bit. But yeah, it captures the feeling you get whenever you really talk about a story that's about people and the large machines that they use. It's all this it's a very specific kind of smallness and melancholy you get. And the story does an excellent job of communicating that very specific tone that you get out of most of these stories, most of these mecha shows and mecha games, where despite being the elite pilot of a 100-foot tall supersonic war machine, you're even that is just so little in comparison to what all is coming, what's coming against you, what's standing against you, what's happening in the world around you. And it manages to balance that feeling with the sort of the power fantasy that you want to get out of a thing like Armored Core. Yeah, it is an excellent story told in a very efficient manner, that nonetheless kept me engaged the whole way through, and I'm definitely excited to get back to it, get true ending on New Game Plus Plus or whenever it rolls around. And also, and I say, it has one of the best rival turned ally characters I've ever seen in a story in Rusty.
Nice.
And you'll if you play it, you'll learn to like him too.
All right, so Red Dead Redemption 2 is a cowboy game, which we don't get enough of outside of this genre. It's made by Rockstar Gaming, who are famous for the Grand Theft Auto series, and this is Grand Theft Horse. It is the next great American novel in video game form, and it is better for it. It is the only open world game that uses its map correctly and makes you grateful that it's an open world game, and forces you to recognize that all of the other open world games are not really that benefited by being open world outside of the marketing that they are open world. When you're actually playing the game, you feel like you're in these places in America. A lot of the biggest fans of this game are from Europe or Britain. Like they are learning about the landscape of America through this game. The writing is so subtle and thought-provoking about life and mortality and your position in the world and morality as well, that it has changed me as a person and made me have some of the deepest conversations that I've had in years with carbon speed dating, and just like shocking developments in the story that genuinely surprise me and make me pause and recover from like the emotional impact that this narrative has to you. I've been playing this game for the better part of a year, and I am scared of the next part of the story because I don't want what's going to happen to my character. And that level of identification is, I think, the beautiful, bright future of American RPGs. That's what gives me hope about the future, is that, I didn't see this level of detail and emotional maturity coming from this studio, and I could not be more pleased. I think this is one of the best games of all time that has ever been made by humans, but it does require a lot of you. It asks, like many of the games that I love, it asks a large amount of time and investment and buy-in before you reap the rewards of the true detail and true depth of this game. It's just so fun to be in this world. So many people in 2022 and 2023 report playing this game, 7 years after it came out, just to log in and just exist in this world and maybe hunt some things or level up your horse or just say howdy to 25 people in a row.
Me every day.
Yeah. And we've talked about this a bit in the past, but when we end up going through the rankings, we've talked about, especially last year, comparing this game and Baldur's Gate, where it's like the difference between a game that is essentially perfect and a game that you also love dearly. Like, it's apples and oranges when it comes to comparisons. At the end of the day, Red Dead is definitely one of those games that just, if there's a game that everyone should play or at least experience in some form, it's certainly Red Dead.
Yeah, and I'm going to also point out, I'm not talking about the online at all. I'm not talking about the online in this in any way. I hear the online has fallen from grace in a very significant, terrible way. I'm just playing the story, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and I don't think you mentioned it, but specifically a cowboy game taking place in 1899, so turn of the century American history, which, as a person that has gone through the American schooling system, is not a time period we talk a lot about. It gets very eclipsed by World War I and the Civil War, both, sandwiched in between, but it's perhaps one of the most interesting time periods at least in my opinion, the 1890s being one of the most interesting time periods scientifically, historically. I mean, there's so much stuff that's getting set up for essentially what is our modern day.
Yeah, it is
world.
the dawning of the
and
modern age.
It is
exactly. Being in Colorado, it's a
Yeah.
very significant geographically, historically. Like, yeah, there's a lot to.
And not only that, but in my opinion, it's the sort of game that I think is perfect as a game. Like if tomorrow they turn around and say, "Oh, we're going to make a Red Dead Redemption 2, I don't know, mini series," it could be good, but it's the existing as a game is also what makes this such a powerful game. I've never seen a game that has that kind of synergy with how you feel as a player and how you want to act in the game. I've never really seen a game that can synergize so beautifully.
Yeah, and I'm going to say also, like, I love Armored Core 6 in a deep, profound, like Gundam Kid way. But Red Dead Redemption 2, I think, is a game that is going to be historically relevant for the future, as a test of how much genuine organic education can be put into a game about our own perception of our past. It already has had like cultural fault lines echoing through in other games. Jack Black made a song about it. Like, it's a big deal. It won, its Game of the Year award when it came out. And that's why it gets my vote for this round.
Yeah,
like
and I know the studio. Oh, yeah,
sorry.
finish. Oh, you're
Yeah,
gonna
I
say?
feel like for Red Dead, from what I know of like how it affected culture after its release, was like we were talking about your game Carbon Speed Dating earlier that I'm blanking on the name of.
The Quarry.
No,
Immortality, the quarry.
yes,
Oh,
the,
yeah.
yeah, Immortality.
Yeah.
Yes, Immortality, bringing people into gaming who ordinarily wouldn't. I feel like Red Dead, from what I've heard of it, is that like it brought people back into gaming. Like it took people who maybe hadn't like played games in a couple of years and were like, "Oh yeah, I love this. This is something that is like fantastic." And it got people,
Yeah.
maybe perhaps not new gamers, but it got old gamers like refound love for the medium.
It did that for me for first person single player RPGs. It was
so
compelling.
Yeah, and I will say just the one thing too, which is that I know that everyone loves Grand Theft Auto, but Grand Theft Auto has done it does nothing for me as a game. Like it's not really a world I want to exist in. I don't really like the characters that much. I've seen playthroughs of it that, it seems like very fun to play, but Red Dead is just an experience both to play, and I spent all this time when you were playing it, Clever Divergent, watching you play it, and it's been just as fulfilling, in my opinion, to be able to like experience that world. So, I know folks are looking forward to the new Grand Theft Auto. I'm looking forward to if they're ever going to make a new Red Dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
Red Dead 3. Think about that.
The story's pretty complete at this point, but I love the world they chose and the attention to detail and depth. And I know there's no reason that crunch had to be involved with Red Dead. It would have taken longer to make, as opposed to other games where like it feels like even if everyone was on their A game, this still would have been kind of a subpar product. Like when we were talking earlier with Starfield, where it's like people just weren't on the same page. And with Red Dead, it feels like everyone was working together to make this such a perfect experience.
Yeah.
And it's sad that there had to be I'm sad there's crunch involved with it. Like that kind of spoils a lot of that beauty, but it's still just a genuine piece of art.
Yeah.
That's as a developer myself, that's something I was going to mention.
Yeah.
Which is Red Dead Redemption 2 is undeniably a phenomenal piece of art, but it does sort of, it came at an unnecessary cost to the people that made it.
Agreed. Very unnecessary. That's the good word to put it, because I don't think that none of the crunch involved was crunch that was needed to get the game out. It was needed to get the game out on the schedule that they were on.
Yeah. It still would have been a great game had it come out 6 months, a year later.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't have been hurt. It may have been even better. You don't know, right?
That's what I was going to mention. Is it may have been better. There was a fantastic Polygon video not long ago about Red Dead Redemption 2. A lot of folks are revisiting it right now, and one of the things it mentions is that there are so many mechanics in the game that just feel unfinished. Like it guides you through this lengthy hunting tutorial at the beginning of the game, where you stalk your prey, you line up a shot, and but it very quickly becomes very obvious that if you run your prey down on the fastest horse you have and shoot it with a gun, like none of that really matters. And similar with the gunplay, the Polygon video mentions a specific gun that had a very novel system of reloading and pulling the trigger that the game half acknowledges, but not in a way that actually benefits the gameplay or the story. And if they'd gone a bit further with that, it would have been a very defining and very it would have lessened the distance between the player and the character that they are playing, which is my favorite thing about video games, is lowering the friction between you and the character you're controlling. And I think that Red Dead Redemption suffers from having such a breadth of attention, and it is very wide and pretty deep. It's not as shallow as I may be making it sound right now. But
I
it's certainly
yeah.
not as deep as
I mean,
some parts of the game would make it seem.
I will say that, depending on what you're defining as deep, because I think that something that I think that Red Dead has done that I don't think any other game except maybe Baldur's Gate has tried to touch on is the idea that if you have an idea in the game, you can go and try it out. Like, there was a couple of moments where you think to yourself, well, I wonder if this person that is being kind of shady, I wonder if I go to their house, I wonder if I can find any evidence of that before like the plot reveals it. And the answer is yes. The answer is it's very, very often it rewards you for like being a little curious. Like there's a very common, random event where somebody will come out of the forest and say, "Oh, I got bit by a snake." And if you walk back, you can find the snake that bit them. Very often
Hmm.
it's dead, but it's like it's very, and that I feel like that, at least for me, is where I think of when I think of like depth.
Yeah,
I
that's some really
think
good attention to detail right there.
Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption has the most beautiful graphics that I've ever
Oh yeah.
seen. I commonly walk into the living room when you two are playing it, and they have just such uncannily realistic uh motifs of fog or a night sky or a small pool of water viewed from on top from a higher trail. There is no better representation of what it feels like to look at the beauty of nature in real life um, in a video game. It is the best representation of the beauty of nature in a video game that I've ever seen.
Oh, I wanted to amend something I said, an error. Uh, the Game Awards actually went to God of War in 2018, not Red Dead Redemption
Wow.
2. So it
Okay,
did
wow.
get
Is
snubbed for its position by a very
yeah,
worthy opponent.
but still, I would argue it's still snubbed. 'Cause, this is something we've talked about a lot, where it's like, what do we mean when we say Game of the Year? And for me, it's what game defined that year.
Yeah.
Like for instance, this most recent year at the Game Awards. I'm not saying that Alan Wake isn't amazing. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones that were like up for Game of the Year, but at the end of, or so it's not to say that Tears of the Kingdom or Alan Wake are worse games, but Baldur's Gate certainly defined the year, and so that's why I think in terms of the Game Awards, why it won over the other ones.
Yeah, and that's
Red Dead,
why,
yeah.
so they tied God of War for 4 of the awards at the Game Awards that year. So they were evenly matched, but the Game of the Year went to God of War. So I'm ready to vote. Are you guys?
Mm-hmm.
I think so too.
Yep.
Go ahead, Rather Sunless.
Oh boy, I was gonna say anyone else but me, but no, I'll go
Ah,
first.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to approach this from a selfish perspective, and it's just which game. Like, I think I can recognize that Red Dead Redemption 2 is perhaps the better and certainly the more meaningful game versus Armored Core 6. But I've played Armored Core 6, and I really want to keep playing Armored Core 6. And Red Dead Redemption 2, I'm perfectly content to watch or to see a little bit of. It's one of those games that's maybe not for me, despite how good it is. So I think I have to put my vote to Armored Core 6.
Yeah.
All right.
I can go. It's certainly going to go to Red Dead for me. It's a sort of game or just story in general that I'm going to be thinking about forever. It's going to be a reference I make for trying to compare with other games doing similar or even just, adjacent ideas in video games or just stories in general.
Hail Noxid.
I'm gonna go with Red Dead as well. It is a story that I think, as a like genre define what you can get out of performance from actors in a video game. I think it is the kind of what Carbon was saying, where it's an incredible story that is benefited by the fact that it is a video game and not a TV series or a movie or a book. It is actually enhanced by the immersion of you playing as this character throughout this storyline.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Shanasaur?
I am also going to go for Red Dead. I'm also not as well versed in the mech genre in general, but Armored Core looks absolutely stunning as just an art form and piece of media. Um, but for me, I'm gonna have to go with Red Dead because I've enjoyed watching the bits that I've seen of Clever Diversion playing it, and I remember the first time that I saw Red Dead Redemption 2 was my cousin-in-law playing it immediately after I had been playing Breath of the Wild. He pulled up Red Dead 2 and was like, oh, this is the same game. We're playing the same game. We're both riding around on horses, exploring this beautiful world, doing these cute little quests. And I was like, yeah, these are both fantastic games in very similar ways. But with Red Dead added the historical and like real world element that makes it so impactful.
Yeah. Clever Diversion.
I gotta go with Red Dead. You know, I'm prepared to make so many speeches about this. You're gonna get full on history professor Mason over here if you're not careful about this. It's 1899. Like this is making me excited for the future of like staying alive and seeing how this art form is going to develop, because the potential to teach history in this medium is incredible for this. And not only that,
You don't
I'm going
think
to stick with
Assassin's
my
Creed is doing it?
well, you know, I mean, that early Assassin's Creed I was hopeful for until they added aliens. You know?
Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean, I was in history classes for that time period when that came out. I was taking Crusades history. Anyway, but yeah, that's like you know, I'll talk about it in later rounds.
Yeah. I agree that Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to win this round because I think I'm the last vote. But I'm going to give mine to Armored Core 6 because as much as I appreciate the detail of Red Dead Redemption 2, it has good writing, it has beautiful visuals, and it's a definition of what open world games should feel like and be. I think that it's a little shallow in some of its things, and you like in the Polygon video, they mentioned that you really want to be this character that lives in this world and, you know, bathe and hunt and portray all of these interactions, you know, with full immersion. And I think that gets old. I think that the game, unfortunately, has too much friction between you and that aspect of the game that kind of makes it fall a little short for me. It is beautiful, and at the end of the Polygon video, they do say that they'll probably come right back to it after a year. But I think Armored Core 6 also has really cool robots, and knowing From Software, they probably put so much depth into this video game that I don't even understand yet. So that's why my vote goes towards Armored Core.
Yeah, I should have been honest and just said it was because it had big, cool robots in it.
I mean, they're really
That's
cool.
valid.
Like
Yeah.
I've got like this video like around here, and like, have you seen this? The video?
The
Maybe you
trailer's
might change your
awesome.
your vote. Like, look at this.
All right.
Like,
Well,
oh wow.
on that note, do you want to talk about Armored Core for our last chance?
I mean, I've said almost that all that needs to be said, and it's an incredibly well-made game that came in, as far as I can tell, without crunch and under budget and on time with no
Great.
bugs. That has big, fun robots in it and a story that'll keep you thinking and keep you doing it.
Well then,
Yeah.
Hale Noxa, do you want to say anything about the fun robots for our last chance?
Friend Robots nailed their mission statement, I think, out of the park. I think it is a game, like we said previously, that is unapologetic for what it is. They designed that game in kind of as the successor to the series, with no punches pulled, and no compromise. And I think there's a lot of integrity and respect for doing that. And they still came out with a, I think, pretty universally appealing robo game.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even though I did not vote for it in this round, my heart desperately wanted to. This game is so cool. It makes you feel so cool. Its soundtrack is incredible. It's some of the best like modern techno soundtrack, or like just industrial like house. I don't know enough about music to know what genre this is, but it's
The
fucking
viewers
awesome.
should watch
And I
this
play it
trailer.
at work secretly in my headphones so that no one else can hear. And I'm like, let's go. It makes you, it has such beautiful skill expression. Its art is incredible. It's simple and deep in a in a meditative way. It makes you really feel like a robot. It's like, it is also one of the games that outline how the jaded sense of militarism through the mercenaries' eyes is actually a horrific institution. That fact that you are killing people that you could be hired by next week, and they remember that, but they still are in desperate enough situations to have to hire you. And that's just a very Japanese Sengoku Jidai-esque feeling, which I think is beautifully outlined by the culture that made this. It's a king of its genre in the sense that it deserves that legacy of Armored Core, bring it into the modern world with such flair and aplomb that it's a celebration of all true mecha fans. It's also spawned an amazing PvP community, and it's just another example of how FromSoft does it right. FromSoft does combat right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Red Dead Redemption 2 wins this round. That brings us to, let's see. Tears of the Kingdom and The Quarry. But before we go into this, how are people feeling?
It is midnight.
It's midnight.
Yeah.
Might be a good place to split because we're kind of halfway through
It's true.
the second round.
Yeah,
And
I think.
I'm looking at some of these rounds that are coming up, and I think they're going to take a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
brain is all kinds of melty.
Mhm.
I really appreciate you guys coming together, and I love it when my friends and I can talk about video games, and this is something that I look forward to at the end of every year, which is why we're doing it in December of 2023, not any later.
When this
Not
was when this
any
was
later.
recorded.
In December 2022, of course.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
of course.
With prophetic future vision for December 2023.
2023.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because we're so
Um,
responsible and well organized.
We're so well
super-
organized that we're good at time travel. It's fine. Don't think too hard about it.
Yep, don't think too hard. Well, we didn't quite get around to identifying the spiciest salsa of 2023 yet, but I'm
That
sure
next
we'll
time.
get around to it next installation, which should come in maybe a week or two. So stay tuned and
Stay spicy.
stay spicy. That's what we
spicy.
always say.
As we always say here.
Yep.
Yeah,
Stay
that's
tuned
what
and
we
stay
always say.
spicy.
Our
Here in
well-known
the Spice
catchphrase,
Squad.
the world over.
All right, GG folks.
GG.
All
I'll
right.
see you next time.
Peace out. I'll see you in part 2.
See y'all. Everyone say bye.
Bye.
Bye.